The interrogation chamber hummed with energy, alien devices glowing ominously around the restrained figure of Captain James Carter. The Zarinx, a species renowned for their cold, unerring logic and technological supremacy, circled their human prisoner with expressions that bordered on frustration, a rare sight for beings who prided themselves on emotional detachment. Commander Escal leaned forward, his sleek, silver-gray form reflecting the pale light of the chamber. "Human," he hissed, his voice sharp and calculated, "you are wasting our time. Tell us the location of your fleet, and this will end swiftly." Carter smirked, his dark eyes betraying no fear. His hands, bound to the chair by glowing restraints, rested easily on the armrests as though he were lounging in a living room rather than at the mercy of an alien warlord. "You've got all this fancy tech," he said casually, tilting his head. "Yet, you still can't figure me out. That's embarrassing." The other Zarinx, tall and thin with smooth, featureless faces, exchanged glances. Their advanced neural probes and psychological manipulation devices had cracked countless species across the galaxy, yet this human, this inferior biological anomaly remained unyielding. His heart rate stayed steady, his mind an unbreakable wall against their psychic intrusions. Every attempt to extract information had been met with resistance or, worse, deliberate confusion. "This isn't logic," Escal muttered to his second-in-command. "Their species defies reason. They should have broken hours ago." Carter chuckled, his laugh low and almost taunting. "Maybe you're looking at this the wrong way. See, humans don't work the same as you do. You might want to take notes." Escal's expression darkened. "Enough of your games. We have dissected entire civilizations to uncover their secrets. Do you think we will hesitate with you?" Carter raised an eyebrow, unfazed. "Oh, I'm sure you're great at tearing things apart. But understanding people? That's a different story. Maybe your issue is that you don't understand what motivates us." The commander stepped back, narrowing his luminous eyes. Despite his best efforts to remain unaffected, Carter's words stirred something unsettling within him, a sense that their inability to break the human wasn't due to the tools they used but to something deeper, something they couldn't grasp. He turned to his team. "Increase the intensity of the neural probe. If he won't cooperate willingly, we'll force it out of him." The alien technicians moved to comply, their long, slender fingers manipulating the controls of the hovering devices. Carter watched them without flinching. "You can crank it up all you want," he said with a shrug. "You still won't get what you're looking for." "You are bluffing," Escal snapped. But there was an edge of uncertainty in his tone. The machines buzzed louder, emitting a faint glow as they worked to penetrate the layers of Carter's mind. Yet, no matter how much energy they expended, no cracks appeared in his demeanor. If anything, he seemed to grow more confident, his grin widening as he watched their mounting frustration. "You know," Carter said, his voice calm, "the more you push, the more you prove my point. You can't win this." For the first time in his career, Escal felt something he couldn't quite name, an unease that no amount of logic could dispel. The air aboard the Zarinx vessel crackled with tension as a new prisoner was escorted into the interrogation chamber. Dr. Emily Hayes, a petite woman with sharp eyes and an unshakable calm, stood surrounded by towering alien figures. Her simple attire and unassuming demeanor made her appear insignificant compared to the advanced, gleaming technology and intimidating presence of her captors. Commander Escal approached, his expression one of mild disdain. "Another human? What is the purpose of this one? Surely not another soldier." Dr. Hayes didn't flinch under his scrutiny. She adjusted her glasses and offered a faint smile. "I'm here because you're failing," she said plainly. "You can't break him, so you thought you'd try someone new." The room fell silent for a moment. The Zarinx weren't accustomed to such directness from their captives. Escal tilted his head, his voice dripping with skepticism. "And what makes you think you will succeed where we have not? Your kind is already proving irrational." Hayes stepped forward, unfazed by the alien's towering presence. "You don't understand humans," she replied, her tone almost conversational. "You think your technology and logic are enough to crack us. But humans don't operate on logic alone. We're messy, emotional, and unpredictable. That's why your methods aren't working." Escal's luminous eyes narrowed. You claim to have insight into your species that we lack. Why should I believe you? You don't have to believe me, Hayes said with a shrug. But if you want results, you'll let me speak to him. Otherwise, you'll keep wasting your time. The commander's gaze lingered on her, weighing her words. Though reluctant, he couldn't ignore the fact that their efforts had been fruitless so far. He gestured for his subordinates to step aside, allowing Hayes to approach Carter's restrained figure. Dr. Hayes, Carter said, his voice tinged with surprise. Didn't expect to see you here. Let's just say I volunteered, Hayes replied, her tone light but with an edge of seriousness. She studied him for a moment, noting the subtle signs of stress in his posture and the defiance still burning in his eyes. You holding up okay? Can't complain, Carter said with a smirk. They're not exactly great at this, are they? Hayes turned to Escal, her expression neutral. You've been relying on brute force and intimidation. It's no wonder he hasn't cracked. Humans thrive under pressure. We adapt. The commander crossed his arms, his patience clearly wearing thin. Then prove your point. Extract the information we need. Hayes folded her arms. Not how this works. You want results, you let me work without interference. There was a tense pause before Escal finally nodded, signaling his agreement. Hayes turned back to Carter, leaning in slightly as if to speak casually. James, she said softly, her voice carrying just enough warmth to disarm him, let's talk. Just you and me. The Zarinks watched, their confidence shaken but their curiosity piqued. For the first time, they wondered if they were truly outmatched, not by their captive's strength, but by the complexity of the human mind. Dr. Hayes sat across from Carter, her posture relaxed as if they were old friends catching up rather than captives in an alien warship. She spoke with a calm authority, her words laced with a subtle intensity. You know, James, they don't get it. To them, you're just a problem to solve, a code to crack. But we're not machines, are we? Carter leaned back, his restraint still glowing faintly, but his eyes sharpened with recognition. No, we're not. And they don't like that one bit. From the observation deck, Commander Escal and his subordinates observed with a mix of skepticism and intrigue. They couldn't decipher the human interaction. Hayes wasn't asking direct questions, nor was she applying any discernible pressure. Instead, she was weaving a conversation, one layered with subtext the Zarinks couldn't grasp. You remember the academy? Hayes continued, her tone conversational but deliberate. That endurance test in the dead of winter. They told us it was impossible to finish without cracking, but you came out of it laughing. Carter's smirk returned. The trick wasn't brute force. It was about pacing yourself, finding the right mental gear. Exactly, Hayes said, her voice soft but charged. It wasn't about what they did to us. It was about how we responded, how we adapted. They think they can just apply pressure until we snap. They don't understand that sometimes pressure makes us sharper. Carter nodded subtly, understanding her point. The Zarinks, oblivious to the nuances, saw only a meaningless exchange of words. Hayes, however, was piecing together a psychological strategy, one aimed not just at bolstering Carter but at subtly dismantling the confidence of their captors. Turning toward the observation deck, Hayes addressed Escal directly. You're relying on predictable patterns. Your methods are designed for creatures who think linearly, who crumble when faced with overwhelming force. But humans don't work like that. We're driven by things you can't quantify: hope, loyalty, defiance. You're trying to solve an equation when what you're dealing with is chaos. Escal's expression remained stoic, but the tension in his stance betrayed his frustration. You speak in riddles, human. None of this brings us closer to what we need. Hayes didn't flinch. Instead, she leaned back, folding her arms with a measured confidence. You're trying to extract data from a mind that doesn't operate like your systems. We don't store information in neat little compartments. It's tangled up with emotions, memories, instincts. That's why your tech keeps failing. And the more you push, the more resistance you create. Carter chuckled softly, playing his part. Told you they wouldn't get it. Hayes glanced at him, her eyes briefly meeting his. They don't need to get it. They just need to understand that brute force isn't the answer. The subtle shift in the room's energy was palpable. For the first time, the Zarinks weren't just interrogators, they were observers in a game they barely understood. Hayes had turned the interrogation into something far more dangerous, a demonstration of human resilience and ingenuity. Hayes shifted her tone, letting her voice carry a sharper edge. "You've misunderstood us from the start," she said, addressing the Zarinks through the observation deck. "You think humanity's strength comes from brute force or stubbornness. But it's not that simple. Our real power lies in turning every disadvantage into an opportunity." Escal's voice crackled through the chamber's speakers. "Empty words. You delay the inevitable. You think this display of so-called resilience will change anything?" Hayes smiled faintly. "You're wrong. It already has." She turned back to Carter, her voice dropping to a low murmur. "Remember the simulations in command training? The scenarios where you were told to fail on purpose, to force your opponent into overconfidence?" Carter nodded slightly, his face unreadable. "Yeah, I remember. Didn't think I'd be playing that out here." "Well," Hayes said with a small shrug, "it's time to flip the board." For a moment, the chamber was quiet except for the faint hum of alien machinery. Then Hayes looked up at the observation deck, her gaze steady. "You've been so focused on breaking him that you never considered he might be feeding you false data, leading you in circles." Escal narrowed his eyes. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting," Hayes said, her voice calm but cutting, "that you've already lost. Every hint you think you've extracted from him, every reaction you've analyzed, it's all been curated, designed to make you think you're gaining ground when you're really chasing your own tail." Escal froze, his mind racing. His subordinates exchanged uneasy glances, uncertainty rippling through their ranks. Hayes took the opening and pressed harder. "You see, humans don't just resist. We adapt. We misdirect. We find your weaknesses and use them against you. While you've been trying to break him, he's been studying you." Carter finally spoke, his voice calm but laced with defiance. "You really think you're the first ones to try this? You're just another in a long line of would-be conquerors who thought they were invincible. And just like the rest, you've underestimated us." Escal's composure wavered for the first time. "You're bluffing." "Are we?" Hayes asked, raising an eyebrow. "Think about it. Every moment you've spent interrogating him, every piece of supposed intel you've gathered, it's all been part of a bigger game. You've revealed more about yourselves than you realize." The tension in the chamber was electric. Hayes and Carter exchanged a brief, knowing glance. Without warning, the alien machinery surrounding Carter flickered and powered down. A faint grin crossed his face. "See? That's the problem with relying on technology. It's easy to turn it against you." Hayes turned back to the observation deck, her voice cold and decisive. "You assumed we were the ones trapped here. But you're wrong. This is your interrogation, Commander. And you've already given us everything we need." Alarms began to blare as the Zarinks scrambled to regain control of their systems. Carter and Hayes moved in sync, their plan unfolding perfectly. Humanity had done what it always did best, taken an impossible situation and turned it into victory.